across these young women. They're also there, they're doing their washing. But I was so broken that day because these young women, when you look in people's eyes and there's no hope, there's nothing. It's like their souls are dead. And so we started doing, activism around the issue of water. But activism isn't enough. You can only do so much with activism. You also then have to practically start helping communities when you get there. When you get to communities and there's no water, it's very difficult to just leave. Yes. So what we've been doing is then making sure that in various communities we put water tankers so that they're at least able to have water, and boreholes, so that those communities are at least able to have water. So that's some of the practical things that we've been doing.
Hi guys, welcome to Mason Simon Show. Today it's such an honor to be joined by a business lady and a parliamentarian, the deputy leader of Build One SA. We have today Sis Nobuntu Webster. How are you, man?
I'm good. I am well. I'm happy to be here.
Such an honor to have you.
Of course.
A lot of us today knows you as a parliamentarian, but we don't know the young you growing up in Lamontville. And one of the best products of Lamontville is Bonga Makanya. Do you know him?
I know of Bonga Makanya.
Yes, now it's contesting for NYDA. And to know that you're also from there, it makes me happy, to say one of my boys, wow, there's so many great products. So growing up there, what are the fond memories do you have?
So, first of all, thank you for having me. Always great to be in a space with young people. So I appreciate that. Now, Lamontville. I was born in Lamontville. So my parents lived with my paternal grandmother at the time in Lamontville. And so when I was born in Lamontville. And we stayed in Lamontville probably till I was about 3 or 4 years old. And then we moved to Inanda. So the bulk of my childhood was actually Inanda. So I consider myself a product of Lamontville and of Inanda. I really, really resonate a lot with both of the places. And the memories I have of growing up, playing on the streets, man, just freedom, the freedom of being a child. I remember that, but I also remember, I was born in the 80s. So I also remember some of what was happening politically at the time. And there was a lot of civil unrest and violence that was taking place. I actually remember some of that. I remember tear gas in the streets. I remember the army in our streets. I remember my dad and my uncles having to go out to fight. I remember that as well. I remember living in two worlds because having grown up in Lamontville and in Inanda from a very, very young age, from about the age of 3 or 4, I went to school in the suburbs. And so I remember that juxtaposition every single day of living in those two worlds. So that's what I remember until when I was 16, we moved to the suburbs ourselves. But by the time I was 15, at the age of 15, you grow. And so my childhood was really those things. I also remember church. Church was a big part of my life, huge part of my life. I remember that as well.
As a young Black kid, what kind of dreams did you have, growing up in these areas?
It's strange because my dreams were so much bigger than the limitations of where I was growing up. Both in Lamontville and Inanda, we lived in a 4-room house. But I had dreams of being on TV, which I did. I think there's always been something political about myself because I've recently been reminded, and I didn't remember this, I've recently been reminded by schoolmates that I was in school with when I was 7 that I said I was going to be president of the country. And I think for me, what it probably was growing up and seeing the world as it was and seeing what needed to be better. Remember, I'm seeing these two worlds every single day. And my only big reference to leadership being presidency. But if you think about it, it's crazy. It's crazy that a 7-year-old Black little girl from at that time in Nanda would think about those things.
Because it wasn't possible.
It wasn't possible. It wasn't possible. I would have never seen that. At least with TV, I think by that time we had Aboma Felicia Mabuza Sato, who had TV shows, and so maybe I could think of that. But to think about presidency, I would have never seen a woman as a president. I would have never seen a black person as a president in our country. And so it's crazy for me that I would have said those kinds of things. So I dreamed big. I also dreamed of like living a good life, you know.
Yes. Christian shouldn't be poor.
Yes, yeah. I dreamed of, you know, a nice house. I dreamed of a nice career. I dreamed of nice cars. I dreamed of those things. Yeah.
What are other events in your life or occasions that shaped you to dream bigger? For an example, about myself was watching movies, being exposed to social media, seeing how other people are living. And recently, as I've been to the universities, accidentally and sometimes visiting people's homes who have like nice homes, nice businesses, nice cars, who dress nice. And I was like, wow. So it means it's possible.
Yeah. For me, what has always driven me is making a difference. I think that's why I'm not a Gazibene. Because like I've always been about that. I've always been driven about wanting to know, why am I here? Why am I on this earth? I've always, for as long as I can remember, that's always mattered to me. And perhaps it's driven by my faith and in the belief that God creates us for a reason and a purpose. And so I've always wanted to figure out how can I make a difference. And so for everything I've been doing in my life, even going into business for me, it was never about making money. As hard as that could be for someone to believe, it wasn't. It was always about how do I worked in corporate, and I looked and I thought, I work in this company, I was doing well, and I was climbing up the corporate ladder very quickly. I was in corporate for a short time, for a couple of years, but I went up that ladder very quickly. And I mean, I was in corporate, maybe it was 3-4 years. And then I was in my own business ever since. And the reason I got into business was that I sat in corporate and I thought, this doesn't look like transformation. You know, I'm here, I'm working hard, I'm doing well. But this business, when I look at the names that are at the bottom of the letterhead, these are not names I relate with. You know, it's a FW, it's a Infanake. You know, like I can't relate. It's mostly men, it's mostly white men. And I wanted to be part of the change of starting to transform the economy and the way the economy looks, and to actually then create a business where young people could gain skills, where young people could have an opportunity. Black young people in particular could have an opportunity to gain skills and to hopefully start their own businesses in the future. And that's what I always say to people who work with me, always, that this is about you using this space as a place to learn. I always give people the space to be entrepreneurial. Yes. You know, if you see an opportunity within the business, go for it. Let's build and let's build it together. And so even in business, it was about purpose. I then found myself leading KZN Chamber of Commerce, Business Women's Association, International Women's Forum, as presidents of those. And even in that, those were things that I did. I wasn't paid for that. Those are things that I did because I saw those as opportunities to be part of leading and contributing to economic change for women, for young people, for Black people in this country.
In 2007, you founded your first company. And years later, in 2013, another one, right?
How do you know all this?
I was just checking a few things.
Yeah.
So just before you went into politics, being a businesswoman, founding this company in the what they call it entertainment space, what are some of the difficulties? Because whenever we are in class, you know, the lecturers and young girls, it's like, it's hard to break into the industry, guys. As a woman, as a Black woman, the directors are men, the scriptwriters are men, this and that are men. That's why one of the courses that we did, we're talking about male gaze. Everything has to be from the point of view of a man. So what are your difficulties in the industry?
So, I mean, I've had businesses in marketing firm. have businesses in economic development consulting, which is, I guess, part of what drives me. And still, I'm still in that space even today. And you, as you rightfully say as well, in media. And it's not easy. The media industry is really, really not easy. TV, particularly, which is the industry our business operates in, is not easy. And the reason is because in this country, the way that the industry is set up is such that you don't have ownership of the industry by the people who work it. So, for instance, all the content that you see on the channels in this country are owned by the channels.
Yes.
Right? And so what happens is you have businesses that are then being paid almost like they work for the channels and for the broadcasters, versus people being able to create content and then own that content and be able to live off that content, whether you're a producer, whether you're an actor in front of the camera, whether you're a presenter, whatever it is, people are not able to live off the royalties of their content and the content they're creating. And that's difficult. And that is a problem, that is a difficulty. And it speaks to the sustainability of businesses and careers in the industry. And it's something that I really do strongly believe needs to change. And so even now, in part of my work in Parliament, in that portfolio committee industry, in the portfolio committee for trade and industry, when we get to talking about the film and TV industry, what I am always pushing for is that government funds ownership. Government funds ownership. Without ownership of content that you're thinking about, content that you're creating, without ownership of that content, what do you have?
Do you think that is even possible? Lately, last year or 2 years ago, I have discovered that the conglomerates, the Universal, the Warner Bros., will not allow anyone to have ownership of their content. They want to own everything. All the films that you see on Netflix or Showmax, if you check when they're starting, they might be shot by Tyler Perry. You will see Universal Studio, who owns those studios. You see Warner Bros., who own. So I have discovered that these conglomerate companies, they want to have more power. They want to own everything. Same thing in the music industry. That's what is happening. That's why people are not, having the ownership of their music. They die poor because we are working. We can say Mapuri he owns a recording label, he's signing people, but he's signing people to Universal. He's not signing people to himself. So he's making money to Universal. Universal give him whatever percentage, and also he takes that percentage, give to the people that he signed to. And then they have to share with the writers, and that's why they end up not owning a lot.
Ownership is very possible, but it needs capital. Ownership is possible, but it needs capital, it needs investment. And that's what our government needs to be doing. Some of what you see on Netflix is owned by the producers. And I know this. I know content that's on Netflix that's owned by the producers. What it takes is you having the capital to be able to create your own content, and then you license it. And you can license that content as many times as you like, ultimately to as many platforms as you like. Sure, some want exclusivity for a certain period, but you're able to license after that. It's also about other models like advertiser-funded programming, having advertisers who then fund your content if it's good enough, and you are able to then license that content on various platforms. So it's possible. You look at Nollywood. How did Nollywood happen? Nollywood happened with entrepreneurial people, and that's what I love about Nigeria. It's such an entrepreneurial spirit. Nollywood happened because people created their own content, and then they created platforms for their own content. It democratized content. It's what's happening in the podcast world. It's democratizing content. And so what's happening in the podcast world can happen broadly in the media industry if there is ownership, and if you're then able to determine where does your content go and how do you generate income from your own content. It's possible. There's no power in content that is directed to by other people and by conglomerates. There's power in content that is your content, that is telling your stories and telling the stories of people. That's where power is.
Productions that have been trying to do that, the productions that shot like, it's called White Wedding with Rapalan and Tatinkos. That shot like other movies. Back then they were trying to do that. And lately everyone wants to get funding from Netflix to shoot a film, wants funding from Showmax, Zans Magic, Mnet, you name them. But one of my best case studies happens to be the Jack Chan team. When you look at Jack Chan, the way he became a big star was because his own people were funding him. Mitsubishi, for an example, one of the companies that was funding his film. Today, we have brothers like Likao who are doing well in the business. It doesn't mean just because liquidations took place, that there are a lot of things that he's still succeeding on. We have brothers like Theo, who's doing well. Brothers like DJ Swoop. But when you approach these black businesses, you say, guys, this is what I'm trying to do. Can you fund me? They don't see a bigger picture of also them advertising their companies and their products on these films that we want to shoot. And they can give us whatever they can afford, because we see they're still all trying to build to fund us so that we can have ownership. What can you say in that regard?
The reality is that we don't know what is happening behind the scenes in all those businesses. And you don't know the capacity that those businesses have. And to be very honest, it's not their business's responsibility. Their business responsibility is to grow their business. But having said that, what you say is that there's opportunity. And I think that becomes about young producers like yourself being able to show the value that they bring. Because nobody owes you anything.
Yes, that's true.
Nobody owes you anything. It's about you being able to create value and to be able to illustrate and show that value so that people can see that there's value here. There's value in this. And if I invest in this, I'll be able to derive value from it. That's the first thing I'm going to say about it. But the second that I have to say about it is that it is government's responsibility. It is government's responsibility to invest in your innovation, to invest in your enterprise as a young black person in this country. And what I have found is that the various programs that exist, particularly through DTIC, for funding the film industry, are not innovative. They're still based on an old model of how broadcasting works and has worked for a long time. And it's not forward looking. It's not looking at actually where's the industry going. It's not looking at saying actually content is getting democratized. How do we help these young producers to own their own, not only content, but platforms as well, in order to be able to grow even beyond just being content makers, to being content proprietors, content owners, those people who acquire actually content for their own platforms as well. And that's the problem. We're not looking to the future. We are doing things as they've always been done, and so we're funding in ways that they've always been done. So you'll find that there's 5 million rand being funded for one film, one movie. What is the return on that? Sometimes 10 million. What is the return on that? It takes a long time to get the kind of return that you need on a film where that much investment has been made. Sure enough, you've created jobs, which is important, but what is the sustainability and what is the return? The return comes when you are focused on films that can be owned on platforms that are owned by young people in this country. And that's where we have to be looking. You guys have to be owning your own platforms, creating and owning your own content and owning your own platforms.
One of my case studies happens to be Dim Dash. Mm-hmm. He recently came up with his own media company where the films that they make, they want to put them there. You can have a subscription to watch their content, just like Amazon Prime and other platforms. So you have been doing well in the business. From someone who's looking from a distance, you can say that you were doing well. But it came 2022, you decided, you know what, I want to expand my horizons. I want to challenge my potentiality and do more. And you went into politics. Why did you go to politics, and specifically the former DA leader, Mr. Musimaiman, said it when he's building one essay, I want to be a part of it.
I didn't go into politics to expand my horizons. I think I was doing quite fine. And I think what I was doing is way easier than this.
Yes.
I went into politics because I got to a point where it was very clear to me that we all struggle with what's happening in this country. We all cry about what's happening in this country. We all cry about how we don't have leaders in this country. But actually, I had this belief, and I still do, that we do have leaders in this country. They're just not in politics. But if that's the case, and if I believe I'm one of those leaders, who am I waiting for to give up their lives and go into politics, if not myself? For me, it was about being the change that I want to see. For me, it was about saying, I know we've waited, and it's real. There's been different eras in this country where then maybe another leader comes and you think, maybe this one will be better. Then maybe another president comes and you think, oh, no, surely this one will be better. And it just hasn't happened. And it became very clear that nobody's coming to save us, and we have to save ourselves. And I was very clear that actually, even myself, if I say I'm a competent leader, I'm not necessarily a savior, though. I'm a competent leader because I can represent South Africans well, and I have a purity of intention about that. But I know there are others. And for me, it was about how can I not only be in politics, but be a part of something that would be about really, truly representing people, something that's really owned by people, something that really is South African. Because me, I'm just a South African leader that wants to be part of bringing a difference. And so Musi and I met, and in our talk we became friends. In our talking, it was clear that we align on values, we align on the kind of vision that we have for the country, and ultimately we co-founded the party. And I think it's testament to the person I am. I had looked around and it was very clear, and I had opportunity to work with and be in various other parties. But when I looked at those parties, none of them was doing anything different. I didn't feel that any of them truly represented people and how they were operating. They operated with the same structures, branches, and this and that, and hierarchies. And it's not South Africans who are going, these are the people that we want to represent us. And so, true to form for who I am, I think it was probably expected that I would be part of starting something, that I'd be co-founder of a party versus joining one. Because I'm the kind of person who, when things aren't working, doesn't believe you must keep on doing things the same way. And so that's how ultimately we started Grow in South Africa.
Like you said, there are so many leaders who are capable of transforming this country, but they are not in politics. I have recently discovered that everyone in the ANC is not capable of making change, of putting this country first. Every time when President Ramaphosa came into power, I was one of the people who was excited. Wow, he's a business Mongol. He built this and that. He's going to build this country. He's going to transform it. Just a few months down the line, less than in 4 months, you see now, man, things are becoming worse. Inflation is rising every now and then, within 4 months. And you later realize, man, this has to be the very, very, very bad mistake that we have made, And even the young ones who are coming from the ANC, my generation, when they come into the ANC, they start being vocal. The moment they give them a position, they keep quiet. A lot of our brothers who are in the ANC, recently they have kept quiet. They support every nonsense that the ANC is doing, every nonsense that the government is doing. If they appointed very incompetent someone, they will praise it because they're getting a little bit of something. They have forgotten of why initially they went into the space. What makes you particularly or build one essay to be different from these others? I can say EFF as what they believe is the best policies, but somewhere they're flawed. There's some of things that need balance there and there. Same thing with MK. There are some of the things that need balance there and there. But when it comes to build one essay, founded by Mr. Musimaiman, and others, and it comes to the party of Mpho Dagada, he's making a lot of noise, but I don't see action in the ground that he's doing. What makes you, as Build One SA, distinct from everyone else?
We've been very clear, even when we were sitting and working on what is this that we're building, and how do we make sure that the difference that we want to be actually is articulated in what we are. We've always been very clear that we want to be a party that is by people for people. And so, for instance, when we came to the elections, our candidates were nominated by communities. They were endorsed. Every candidate had to have 1,000 endorsements. They then went through a process where they were vetted by an independent panel. Musi and myself were not involved in that panel at all. So when we got the list, we got the list. We were not involved in that. It is a process where it's communities and constituencies that have endorsed those people as leaders, and it's an independent panel that has vetted them for their leadership and their experience. And that is one of the things that makes it different, is that we want to be saying, you as communities need to choose your leaders. You've spoken now about the ANC and how you've come to a conclusion that actually nobody there is capable, and how people change once they are in the party. And so that's why it's important that it's the community who decides who the candidates are and not the party itself. Because the party is going to choose people for patronage, for loyalty, for what can you do for me? But it's got to be South Africans who are able to choose their leaders. And so that's how we're different. We are so intent on, even now in Parliament, staying so connected to communities and the constituencies that we lead. I have, over the past couple of weeks, been engaged with SMEs in different parts of the country. We make sure that we're staying completely close, different constituencies, different communities in different areas throughout the country. We're staying completely engaged with those communities. So what we're doing, even in Parliament, reflects what you're saying, and what we're pushing for in Parliament reflects what you're saying, and we have that relationship and that communication where we make sure that the voice that we have is representative of you, it's your voice.
Like I previously said, a lot of these political leaders are making a lot of noise. MK, everyone knows about it recently. No one doesn't know about it. But none of us can point, this is the action that MK is doing on the ground. I can say without any fear of anything that Duduzan with his team is doing more work on the ground than MK as a party. I have seen the posts, the things that they do. They clean the streets. They help people renovate their houses. I haven't seen MK doing that. I haven't seen my brother Podagara doing that. I haven't seen Rising Zans doing something on the ground. Lately, I have seen you moving in other houses, which I will give you the opportunity to tell us what is it that you're doing and why you decided to go to these communities to help them.
So we've been working a lot with communities around the issue of water. About 2 years ago, I really discovered that we have a water crisis in this country. I'd go to communities, and what I would find in communities is that there's no water. So these could be rural communities, these could be urban communities, and various townships in different provinces. There's an issue of water. And so we started doing, activism around the issue of water, but activism isn't enough. You can only do so much with activism. You also then have to practically start helping communities when you get there. When you get to communities and there's no water, it's very difficult to just leave. Yes. So what we've been doing is then making sure that in various communities we put water tankers so that they're at least able to have water and boreholes, so that those communities are at least able to have water. So that's some of the practical things that we've been doing. We've worked with various small businesses, especially this part in the Western Cape, where we work with other organizations who are able to give them poultry startup kits. We were able to give them various startup kits, even with cooperatives and KZN as well. Startup kits for cooperatives and for SMEs to actually work and to actually make sure that they are putting food on the table and making sure that they can actually ultimately feed their families. Those are just some of the things that we have done and continue to do. Because the reality is that while we do the work of policy making and legislation, and we're working really hard in that instance. I mean, as it is now, there's various interventions that we have done in Gauteng through our Gauteng legislator representative, who's doing incredible work in Gauteng to make sure that when it comes to, for instance, some of the SMMEs that were approved monies and didn't get them, that starts to turn around and that they start to get that. We are doing work with the National Register for Sex Offenders, which now there's commitment to make that public. You know, some of the things where we have been pushing for legislative and policy changes, we can now start seeing that happen. But there's also the practical things. The reality is you go to communities and there's realities, you know, that you just have to address. We have been to schools where they're really struggling with electricity, and ultimately you just have to buy inverters or generators for that school because that's a reality. You just can't leave. So those are some of the things that one has been doing and that we're doing in communities, because at the end of the day, they're practical things.
You know, as a person, you might be business person, have millions and billions, but at the end of the day, as an African, you still have that Ubuntu in you. In saying that, what are some of your experiences that you experienced when going to these communities that were most heartbreaking? You know, for an example, we have young girls in rural areas, in townships, during menstruation cycles. They don't come to school. Some are embarrassed because they can't afford those things. So those heartbreaking occasions that you had to encounter.
You know, I'm brought to tears even thinking about some of the things that I've seen. There's so many. I wouldn't even know where to start. I remember going to a community here, Ekwileni, and finding the kind of settlement where I just arrived and I just broke down. Because before we even went in and engaged people, just looking at the conditions that people were living in. You know, when you see the kind of informal settlements where it's not even a room, you know, the size of this dwelling is not even the size of a room. And there's a family staying here. You see big rats everywhere. You look at just the states of even just the environment where these people in 2024, 2025 have to be living with a government, a black government, that has led for 30 years. That is heartbreaking. Just, you know, just that. It is heartbreaking. It doesn't have to be, you know, some big dramatic story. For me, the things that have broken me are just seeing the conditions that South Africans have to live under. Absolutely heartbreaking. I remember being in Limpopo and we went to this river because it was a water issue. And we went to this river where the people would draw water from. And I got to this place and the river in and of itself is, you know, really dirty. There's diapers that are floating in the same river, and then they're washing in the same rivers. Others are drawing water. There were kids that were there, and this is during the week, Wednesday at 10 o'clock. There's kids that are there. They're there to collect water as well. They're carrying a wheelbarrow, and you know, you speak to the kids. Why aren't you at school? No, there's no money for us to go to school, so we don't go to school. And they're there to collect this water. And ultimately, as we walk further along the river, come across these young women. They're also there, they're doing their washing. But you know, I was so broken that day because these young women, you know, when you look in people's eyes and there's no hope, there's nothing. Like it's like their souls are dead.
I was born here, I found this like this. My father and mother have been living.
Their souls are dead. And I asked Ranja to know, I had to drop out of school. She has a child on her back. There were two of them that dropped out of school because there was no money for school. But more than anything, what broke my heart was just looking into their eyes and just seeing a loss of hope, no hope. It's like your very soul has died. I remember sitting there and thinking, we can say this government has broken systems, they've broken infrastructure, they've broken promises. But the worst thing that they've broken lives and broken souls. That day, I actually asked those young women, can I pray for the first time? Because it just felt like this needs some sort of divine intervention. Not only what we can do for this community, which we did, brought up borehole, and we assisted with food hampers here and there, whatever it was. But it needed more. People are broken.
In saying that, you might be rich, you might be able to afford whatever that you want, take your kids to good schools. But when you meet these people who are struggling, you can't adopt everyone. There are so many of us who are struggling. And you just can't, and you see this almost everywhere where you go. What are some of the things that you did after that? Like, I had a conversation with Mebusisi Mukabani. She told me already when she was in Parliament, there were times whereby they were given tasks to go into their communities, clinics, hospitals, police station to check if everything is okay, and then compile a report to present it to Parliament so that the Parliament may take an action, may hold those mayors accountable, or whoever that needs to be held accountable. What are some of the things that you took beyond? Because those food parcels is just a temporary thing.
It's a temporary thing. But the very reason one is in politics is to be able to say, how do we effect more sustainable change? First of all, those young people need to be in school.
Yes.
And so how do we make sure that those young people are actually in school? And they cite economic reasons for not being in school. And I really, really, really believe that to change this country, we have to change the economy. And so a lot of the work that we're doing is on economy. I'm working very, very hard on the Small Business Development Portfolio Committee and on the Trade and Industry Committee in Parliament to make sure that we start to build SMEs in this country and that we start to build the economy in this country. Because if those young people that I met, if there was a job at home, they would at least, because they're saying the reasons are that we don't have uniform and we don't have school shoes. And that's why we can't go to school.
Do you know that some they don't even qualify for this SASA money? Because you can find that the mother, one of the parents, left them when they were young, and they were not registered on the database of Home Affairs. Now they don't even have identification.
But for me, ultimately, it's about making sure that we can put jobs in homes. And so that is a lot of the work that we're doing. We're doing very intentional work in making sure that we hold those departments in Parliament to account. Stella Ndabeni's department in small business development is really, really failing us. It's failing us. Small businesses are our hope in this country. And that department is failing us. And so in that committee, I am there holding that department and that minister to account. Part of what is important in that committee and what I've raised in that committee and what I'm lobbying for is things like the fact that there is an annual performance plan, and that is what the department and the minister are judged on, whether they've performed. But that annual performance plan, what is in it are things that are not contributing to growing SMEs. So if you put in that annual performance plan supported 10,000 businesses, what does that mean? What did you do for those businesses? Did they grow? Did your intervention make them grow? Were they able to hire more people? Did they make them more sustainable? So part of those things, and that is the power that sits in Parliament, is that you're able, if you can lobby enough people in the committee, and which is what I'm doing, to say, we can't pass this annual performance plan. Your plan has to have direct outputs that actually change and grow SMMEs, so we can ultimately be able to say, at the end of this year, so many SMMEs were helped, and this is how many jobs they actually created. Now that's tangible. That's saying that there are actual SMMEs that were contributed to and that were able to build more jobs and create more jobs so that somebody like that young girl can actually work.
Recently of this week, the government, the provincial government, Gauteng is the province that holds the capital city of the country. But when you travel in Gauteng, it's a mess. Even in the capital city of the country, it's a mess. The buildings are dilapidated. There is trash everywhere. There are rats everywhere. The streets are not safe. People are getting mugged. And now everyone is tatazeling. The Premier of Gauteng, Panyaza Lesufi, you wanted that position, by the way. I wish maybe if you could have gotten it, maybe things would have been better. But now everyone is shaking. That they are unease right now because of the G20. They're trying to better things. What are your thoughts on that? They have been relaxed for 30 years to leave the city, get destroyed. The traffic lights get destroyed. The cables being stolen. The traffic lights are not working. The bridges are not being renovated. The government buildings. There's a government building where the IEC is at here in CBD is dilapidated. Just Sato House here. When you see outside, like things are not going well. What are your thoughts on that?
We need to change leadership. And like you said, it's not the ANC. It's as simple as that. Because we can sit here, we can be academic about it, and we can talk about what needs to change and what needs to happen. But it won't change and it won't happen while you still have the same people that have been doing the same thing for 30 years. We need to change the government that we have. And I'm proud of South Africans for having brought the ANC below 40%. But actually, they need to go, below 50%. But they need to go below even that. The ANC has to go, really, they have to go. And if you're talking about the reality that we face, which is that we're going to have coalition governments for a while in this country, and we have to get used to it. But the ANC cannot be a leader of that coalition government because nothing is changing. Everything is still the same. And so what has to happen, if I were to answer you, we have to make sure that we change government. We have to change the leadership in this country. There are capable leaders. There are parties that have shown themselves and that have grabbed their heads to lead in this country. And that's what we've got to do. Because this that we have here is a party and a government that has consistently shown us that they don't care.
Let's say when you are contesting for the premier position, you have gotten that position. What would you have done differently to better this province?
One of the big issues in this province is the municipalities and the performance of the municipalities. And part of the work of COPTA is to make sure that there is performance that is taking place at local government and to make sure that there is collaboration between different spheres of government and the various different departments that sit. That's one of the things that is lacking, is holding municipalities to account. The Johannesburg municipality is a mess. Empoleni municipality is a mess. Empoleni has not been functioning well. What has the Premier done about that? What has the provincial government done about that? We don't have enough of that taking place. And that's the first. The second is the economy of this province. You rightfully said that this province is meant to be the economic hub of this country. But what we see doesn't enable that. So when you have roads that aren't working, when you have service delivery, like water and electricity that is challenged like how it is, you then can't have an economy that works and an economy that grows. When you have the kind of corruption that's happening even with the programs that are supposed to stimulate the economy, you can't grow the economy. And so it's very simple things that need to happen. In fact, it's very simple things that sit within the purview, within the responsibility of a premier and of a provincial government that are not taking place. And this premier talks about really grand ideas. bullet trains and, all these grand things he's always talking about, but he fails to do the simple things of ensuring that municipalities are delivering basic services, of ensuring that there are economic programs in this country that actually work and that are not rooted and that are not given over to patronage. The Premier fails to do just that.
Do you think that the Premier, although he's wanting to bring change, there are higher powers like in the national government that is holding him back to say, okay, maybe they're benefiting something in the upper structures. That is why it's beyond his power and his will and control.
It should not be there if it's beyond his power as a start. But secondly, these are things that do not need any sort of higher power. He has all the authority as a premier. And if his patronage is to certain higher powers in his party and not to the people of this province, then he absolutely should not be there. Absolutely, there is no leader that should be accounting more strongly to their party than they are to the needs of the citizens of this country. And when it comes to their party, accounting more to the needs of the party, the corrupt needs and the patronage of their party, versus accounting to and delivering for the citizens of this country. That person should not be in leadership.
Here in Joburg, just by Recent, called Recent Street, just next to the park station, there's one of the streets they have been renovating for the past 5 years now. It's not finished, it's closed. And that street, that's the same street that the metro buses are using, the other buses are using. It's closed. Last year, if I'm not mistaken, there's a street, I think it's Lilian Ngoine in the CBD, the gas disaster that happened, it's exploded. Renovation has been taking place forever. N17 there next to the street that goes to Springs, the bridge is dilapidated and now it's dangerous for cars to move around that area. They have closed that N17. Imagine N17 is one of the busiest streets in Gauteng. They have closed that for a year or two and nothing is happening. No one is taking action to renovate so that the trucks that are transporting goods to these municipalities and metros can be able to use that road, and anyone else that wants to use that road can be able to. So in conclusion, let's say the next coming 2029 elections happen. Gauteng is so dear to me because that's where a lot of our businesses are here, a lot of our state offices are here. What is it that we say One Belt SA when it comes to power will do better, to make sure that transportation is much easier, even communication. A lot of areas where internet it's not working properly. Water, as you have mentioned, it's a disaster. In schools, there's some schools whereby kids don't have Wi-Fi and then can't afford to buy data. What is it that building One SA will do differently? I'm not saying in 4 years they will be able to change everything entirely that have been ignored in the past 8 years.
Before we even get to that, you're talking about the roads, and the backlog, and just the dilapidation of the roads in this province. I'll tell you something. There's housing challenges in this country that are so real. When I talk about the states that I found people in, that's something that's very, very close to my heart. When I was campaigning for candidacy of premiership in this province, one of the things that really moved me, like I'm saying, it could move me to tears, was the state that people are living in this province. There's a backlog of over 1 million houses just in Gauteng. And a lot of that has to do with corruption. When we started investigating what has happened, people's sites, people's houses have been sold over to other people in corrupt manners. There are people who've been waiting and have been approved for housing for 15 years, some for even 20. We have those kinds of situations, and that is because the officials in those departments are actually taking kickbacks to be able to sell those sites and those houses that have been allocated to other people to somebody else. The corruption in this province starts right from the top, right to the bottom. It filters right even the officials that sit as ministers, as MECs in this province and directors, etc., all involved in corruption. The first thing to do is to root out corruption in this province, because a lot of what is failing because of corruption, and that would be the first thing. But before we even get to 2029, there's 2026.
Yes.
And for 2026, we started working with and engaging with various candidates that our communities are identifying and saying they want those people to lead in 2026. And so before we even get to 2029 and we talk about Gauteng, we are working very hard to make sure that we have candidates that sit as mayors, as councillors, as MMCs in 2026. Because then, when you are talking about Gauteng, already you have representation at local level that's ensuring that basic services are being delivered. And then your work in 2029 in Gauteng becomes making sure that you are consolidating that you are providing, making sure that resources are spent correctly, in making sure that you are delivering on schooling and education. You're making sure that you're delivering on healthcare, hospitals in this province, where there's corruption happening there as well when it comes to the resources and the infrastructure that are in those hospitals. Make sure that you clean that up. You make sure that when it comes to education, there are so many schools where monies have been spent to build schools, but those schools are unoccupiable. I mean, what is that? Millions. We're talking millions. And so you make sure that you have the right infrastructure, the right resources. That's what I'm saying. The things are basic for there to be delivery on issues like education and healthcare. And then you then make sure that there's collaborative working within the different spheres of government to make sure that those municipalities are delivering on basic services. But you are ensuring that the infrastructure is stable. And more than anything, for me, have to catalyze the economy. Have to catalyze the economy. Have to make sure that you are catalyzing the economy. You are building various hubs. And for me, I'm very, very passionate about township economy, and Gauteng is one of the places where you have to focus on that. You're building various innovation hubs. You're building special economic zones in the various townships throughout Gauteng. And that's how you start to catalyze the economy and ensure that people are working. You have investment that now comes into various industries where you've created special economic zones and townships. You have people that are working where they live, and so they don't have to be moving and leaving their families to go and work every single day. You make sure that in that way, you are boosting and catalyzing and creating vibrant economies, even in townships in this country, creating not just jobs, but you're creating value chains that are able to then grow the economy across the province.
In conclusion, South Africa is a big brother, to a lot of countries in Africa, not only in SADC, but a lot of countries in Africa, they look up to South Africa. Is Baragwanath the biggest hospital in Africa? Baragwanath Hospital in Soweto. But when you go there, a lot of equipment is not there. You'll find that machine for chemo, for cancer, it's only one. People are lining up the hundreds and hundreds, and some are dying before they use that one machine. And you look at all these things that we are not doing well as a black government. And you ask yourself, okay, these guys were in exile. They spend a lot of the time not using cars, not using phones, not being partying, and every now they come back old. Now they want to catch up on their missed youth years. They want to party. They want to go on yachts, 70 million yachts to Cape Town. 70 million yachts to Cape Town for a meeting. They want to catch up with Mr. Mbalula and everyone else in the years that they missed in exile. And they ignore to do the things that better the country. In conclusion, what can you say? Because a lot of young people have given up hope, even in voting, to say, okay, we have been voting. Not forgetting that they have been voting for some people, So maybe it's one of the reasons we're still here. What is the final message that you can give to young people in particular who have given hope in voting to say we don't want to vote, and those old people who are trapped voting for ANC and IFP and others saying they fought for our freedom, forgetting that it's not only ANC, PAC was there, others were there. They fought, even others who moved away from the ANC, they fought for our freedom, but they feel like they're indebted to the ANC.
I would say, especially to young people, we can't give up.
Yes.
We have this one life, we have this one country, and we can't give up on our country. We have to fight for our country. First of all, I'd say, it's easier to believe in something that you're a part of. Right?
Yes.
And so I'd say get active. Get active in something. Find a political party to get active in. Find a political party to engage with. Find a way to actually engage your own community in issues of governance and politics in this country. Get involved. Because I will keep saying this, nobody's coming to save us. It's going to be us. So you have to stand up. And you have to be involved, first and foremost. So that come time for voting, you're voting for something you're engaged in. You're voting for something you're a part of. You're voting for something you contribute to. You can see some of your contributions being there in the policies. You can see some of your contributions being in some of the work that happens. These are people you engage with, people that you trust. These are your leaders. Get involved so that you're voting for something that you are a part of. I'm here and I'm doing this not as a politician, but as a South African. As a South African mother, as a South African leader. And I'm here doing it because I genuinely believe in this country and in who and what we can be, and also because I've got nowhere else to go. If I leave this up to anybody else, if I leave this up to the people we've lifted up to for the past 30 years, then we've seen a small glimpse of where we can ultimately end up, which is not good. So I'm here because I'm saying I've got something to give and I've got something to contribute to this country. But I know that it's not just me. There are so many of us. So don't give up on the country. Get involved.
In a minute, because of time, in a minute, when years later, when you are retired, sitting at your home, maybe playing with your grandkids or watching TV, listening to radio, what is it that when you are sitting there, you will be like, wow, Nobuntu girl, you were part of shaping this country and bettering this country. You shaped and you were part of making history in this country. What is it that you want to see have happened or you have contributed?
It might not be a minute, but it's important. So I talk a lot about townships and the township economy. And I spoke about it now when you were asking about it. That's because more than 50% of the urban population, close to 70% urban population are in townships in this country. Black townships, Indian townships, colored townships. That's where we live. It's our reality. I believe so much in us as a people and in our ability to build these spaces and to make out of something that was meant to oppress us, to turn that around, because we're here now, and this is where we are, and this is where we live, to turn that around and create spaces that become spaces of prosperity, that become spaces of thriving, that become spaces of productivity. So if when I'm retired, I can look around and I can see townships that now have great infrastructure, great roads, that have great digital infrastructure, that have innovation centers, that have factories, that have film and television studios, and to have people, our people, owning those spaces, to have spaces that are healthy for communities and for families to live in our townships. So spaces of wealth where we are now creating wealth, not just jobs only, but we're creating wealth in our townships. So you have skyscrapers. If we can turn what was meant for evil, what was meant for our demise, into places of prosperity in our townships, I would have contributed to some great.
Ma'am, I wish you all the best in your personal life and in your political life, everything that you want to do. I believe in a man called God who sits up there. I believe he's the one who looks after me. And in saying that, I want to say, may God bless you in everything that you do, and may He continue to give you a will to make a difference and more wisdom and a passion. Never forget who you are, as the African proverb say. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.